Okay, everybody. Hello there. Um, Tried out a direct to X and also simulcast on YouTube live stream for the first time a couple of days ago. Seemed to go fairly well. Reception was positive in the main, although obviously you're always going to have trolls trickling in to needle you. But what can I say? I tend to do the same thing on occasion, so I won't begrudge the trolls. Um, in this past week or so, now a little bit more, I've kept a running tab of what I estimate the odds to be of a Biden withdrawal. Because I'm not really that fond of the genre of punditry that has pundits always making these grand predictions, grand statements of truth or fact, where they project out future circumstances that they couldn't possibly have sufficient knowledge to make with any factual predication that anybody should think of as satisfactory. And I won't name names, but there are legions of pundits who, as one of their main jobs in life, seem to think that they have to be constantly making these firm, unwavering predictions. And then, for the most part, they never pay any kind of price. They never even reevaluate when those predictions are wrong, and they just barrel forward making additional predictions. And I would think that, let's say I were to predict that Biden is going to withdraw in the next week, and you've seen comparable predictions recently, and then it doesn't happen. I don't know, I would think that that would rightly diminish my credibility. It would call into question the kind of epistemic framework that I'm using for making these statements because you're shown to have been wrong, right? Flat, dead, provably wrong. So I just think it's a bad, talking about cognition, speaking of cognition, it's a bad cognitive habit to be always making these strident predictions, um, or almost statements of factual certainty as to what's going to happen. And then when it doesn't happen, you just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move right on. Nothing changes. I would think I live. Maybe I'm unusual in my disposition on this stuff, but if that were me, like if I had been proven flat wrong on something, I would really take stock. I would question, should I even be in this line of work, right? But there's no penalty really for the punditocracy. So they don't have to really calculate along those lines. And of course, they're just random commenters and people on the media who kind of just fuse together in this kind of tangle of pundit type figures who probably even have less standards than others. I think in a way, it comes down to, for me anyway, and I'm only speaking for myself, although I think it's probably decent advice for others. It comes down to like a kind of a journalistic philosophy on my part. And I'm not saying that having a journalistic philosophy is the supremely virtuous philosophy that anybody can adopt. But one of the cardinal sins of journalism, in theory, not that it's always upheld, or not that anybody is as fearful of committing this sin, but it's saying something that's factually wrong. Right, that's the number one thing that you rush in and correct, or people like I've done it before. Journalists, if they're legitimate, and many of them, you know, uh, are a bit inferior in their legitimacy. But if they're legitimate, what journalists do is they like lie awake at night wondering if they crossed every T and dotted every I, or if they double checked every little fact, because it's going to be up for public scrutiny. You know that your reputation, your credibility rightly hinges on whether you are sure that everything is factually correct. And then hopefully you make a correction if there's an inadvertent error. I don't even see how it could be an inadvertent error if you're making one of these definitive statements of truth or fact about a future event and then it doesn't come to pass. So I don't know. I just don't like the whole. That's to me what really defines a pundit, which I kind of use in a more derogatory sense than a a journalist, again, not to elevate journalism as this, this saintly trade or practice or anything, but I don't know. I just think a journalist is more circumspect in saying those types of things, and I think justifiably, rightly so, because you stake your reputation, your credibility on your fidelity to facts, and I just see a wild infidelity to facts among people who make these definitive predictions. So, what have I been doing? Now, people might say this is a cop out, or this is like an evasion, or this is an end run to do the same thing as a prediction, but I'm really not making a prediction. What I do in having like my running odds is just evaluate evidence as it comes in on any given day, and then project that out into just a likelihood that I tentatively estimate, accords with the potential outcome, meaning of a Biden withdrawal. So I think it was on Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday of this past week. I think it was Tuesday. The odds really shot up heavily because that was the first day that there was an initial breaking of the ranks within the elected Democratic Party class, particularly in Congress. Lloyd Doggett, the longtime Democratic congressman from Texas, Austin area, safe seat, quote unquote, meaning he's very unlikely to lose to a Republican in a general election. So he has more breathing room politically to maybe go out on a limb, play a kind of elder statesman role where he can say something or convey a message on behalf of other of his colleagues and also other interest groups that he's in frequent contact with, that maybe they themselves feel inhibited from saying on their own accord. So when I saw that Lloyd Doggett issued a statement on, I think it was July 2nd, July 3rd, July 2nd, I'm pretty sure. I don't know why I'm so hung up on the exact date. See, I'm a stickler for the facts. There you have it. He said that when he came out and said that, it was pretty clear that he was, meaning he called on Biden to withdraw explicitly for the first time of any Democratic member of Congress. It was pretty obvious that he had been making that statement as a reflection of a growing sentiment within the caucus. So given that he had been in office since 1995, toward the tail end of his career anyway, I think he was in his late 70s, he could maybe take some of the political risk that might be incurred to him by dint of making that statement. So I revised my odds substantially upward after that statement. Again, it wasn't only because one random member of Congress made a statement, it was because it seemed to be reflective of a larger growing sentiment. And then I revised them up again to the maximum I've had so far is 40% as of Monday, Tuesday. Because after Doggett made his statement, there were additional statements made by other members of Congress, including Jamie Raskin, who didn't explicitly call on Biden to withdraw, but he seemed to clearly allude to a concerted effort among certain Democratic members of Congress to mount some kind of effort to implore Biden to withdraw. And so its momentum was clearly growing. There were leaks about how draft letters had been circulated. But then on Tuesday, so the day before the 4th of July, which was yesterday, so the Democratic governors all had a meeting with Biden at the White House. Many of them were there in person. Others were over Zoom or what have you. And at that point, I revised back down my estimate from 40% to 35%. Now, are these numbers somewhat arbitrary? Sure, but I'm just giving you my best approximation of what I think the odds are. And by the way, an incumbent president who declares that he's running for a re-election has secured delegates all the delegates that virtually assure him the nomination of the party, to have a 35% chance of withdrawal, that is unto itself unprecedentedly high. So don't read into this that I'm, I think, exaggeratedly diminishing the odds. I'm still assigning very extreme odds in the totality of circumstances, right? But I do think that the consensus within the media sphere or the social media sphere or within Democratic insider chatter, those odds are now being overrated. Okay, so I revised them down. I revised my personal odds down to 35 because the Democratic governors have essentially put on a united front. You had Kathy Hochul, governor of New York, Wes Moore, governor of Maryland, and Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, giving a short press availability in front of the White House after that meeting, and they all declared that they're unstinting support for Biden. They said he was going to stay in the race. There was no chance of him leaving. He's in it to win it, etc. So that's one of my key metrics that I'm evaluating. As this crisis, so-called, transpires, it's obviously the sentiments that are being publicized by the Democratic elected class, as opposed to random pundits, insiders. That's a factor. I mean, the media clamor is a factor, but it's not as dispositive a factor as I see it as what the Democratic elected officials are doing. So to have ostensible apparent unity among the Democratic governors is a big thing. And so I revised down the odds to 35. But I think that's probably around where they stand now. Part of why I decided to do this stream, in addition to all the wonderful comments I got the previous time, is that I wanted to kind of think through what revision I may or may not give in the wake of the Biden interview tonight that was on ABC with George Stephanopoulos. I don't have a firm conclusion yet, but I'll probably arrive at it over the course of this stream. So I will look at comments and maybe somebody can say something that will enlighten me. So I will occasionally glance at the chat and respond where people are saying something useful, which is not a guarantee. So now there has been a trickle of additional members of Congress, Democrats, who have also called on Biden to withdraw. I think there was another one today, or there were two more today, where Seth Moulton confirmed that he was calling on Biden to withdraw. Yesterday, the day before, he put out a statement that was more ambiguous. I mean, the clear implication was that he seemed to want Biden to consider withdrawing, but he didn't say it outright and directly. Today, his office did confirm that he is calling for Biden to step aside. So that's number 3. Raul Gravalia was the second. And number 4 is Mike Quigley, who was on MSNBC tonight with Chris Hayes. And, another one of these anguished conversations that Democrats are praising themselves for having. They think it's so laudable that they're willing to have these difficult conversations amongst themselves, meaning amongst fellow Democratic insiders, because the voters are cut out of the conversation at this point, right? The primaries are all over. It's too late to go back and redo those. So they're trying to claim that the willingness of the Democratic insiders, and I use that term very sarcastically, to have this conversation about the ability of Biden to continue running, reflects so admirably upon them, as opposed to the Republicans, who they denounce as being in a personality cult and with an authoritarian tyrant leader and what have you. Now, I don't go as far with the hyperbole regarding the Republicans, but there is I would contend, a historically unprecedented personality cult around Trump. Not that every single Trump voter is succumbing to this personality cult, but it is extremely powerful. Trump blasts out one Truth Social post, and he can topple incumbent Republican members of Congress, as Trump did with Bob Good in Virginia a couple of weeks ago. And so that strikes fear into the heart of every Republican member of Congress who know that their single most task for remaining in office, apparently, is to express their undying fealty and loyalty and servitude to Trump. Because when Trump intervened in that primary with Bob Good and endorsed this other guy, John McGuire, who, by the way, ran against Good, partially on the grounds that Good was insufficiently supportive of Israel, because Good voted against the 20-something billion component of the National Security Supplemental Package for Israel in April. Good maintained he's still just as flamboyantly supportive of Israel as he had ever been, but he had qualms with how it was being paid for and whatever. But his opponent, the Trump-endorsed opponent, nonetheless used that to attack Good with Trump's, bombastic imprimaturs, and it worked. Good is apparently challenging the results of that primary race, but the final result was certified a couple of days ago, and Good lost. So I'm not even contesting, the basic point that there is this very powerful, I think corrosive personality cult dynamic going on within the Republican Party. But for Democrats to try to use that as a point of contrast to lather themselves with praise as though they didn't collectively decide to stifle any legitimate primary contest in 2024, even though everybody knew, as I mentioned in the last stream, anybody who can Google Joe Biden and click on his Wikipedia page and check his date of birth could have mathematically calculated that Biden would be 81 when almost 82 when at the 2024 election, and he would be 86 were he to serve a full 4-year second term. So even if even if Biden did like a mediocre or passable job rather than a, abysmal job at the debate last week, it still would have been very abundantly obvious from all manner of his clips, not just the ones that maybe a little bit selectively edited by the RNC or whatever, but by all manner of evidence that it would be highly questionable, to put it charitably, that Biden could be reliably competent throughout a full second term as he moves toward the age of 86. I mean, I'm not sorry. I just don't think I think it stretches credulity that anybody, even if you're the most fit and mentally sharp 86-year-old on the planet, that anybody who's 86 should be president, given the overwhelming extreme stressors that you're dealing with every single day on that job. Now, maybe, human advancement technology or life prolongment technology or whatever else people are cooking up in those worlds could make it so that at some point, people at age 86 retain like their mental and physical faculties to such a degree that it would be less dubious if they could serve it in the job at 86. But I don't think we're at that point now. Who knows what could what the technological state of play could be in decades from now. But I'm saying as of now, 2024, I just don't really think that anybody could make a sound argument that somebody at age 86 ought to be president. And yeah, I do think that also applies to Trump, obviously to a lesser extent. But Trump would be the oldest president ever to be elected if he wins this year, surpassing the previous record holder as the oldest ever elected president, which was Joe Biden in 2020. And Trump would be in his 80s in this next term. And I just don't think that that's really optimal for a role like president where you need to be, I don't know, most 45-year-olds probably don't have the mental acuity to be president. So it's just ridiculous. But of course, like people have all these partisan motivations and incentives to kind of obfuscate that point. And I'm not saying that Trump, must withdraw from the race right now because he's too old or whatever, but I'm just saying it is still a relevant consideration. But this idea that Democrats are owed this gratitude for their amazing transparency and willingness to run around now for the past week and a half or so with their hair on fire um, uh, or past week with their hair on fire, you know, in anguished lament that they might not be able to beat Trump now. They don't. That's not something that is deserving of like our respect and admiration. I mean, it's a situation that they collectively put themselves into by meekly and deferentially declining to allow for a contested primary, and by at least to a certain extent maintaining this like vow of silence around Biden's obvious cognitive depreciation. So there's nothing there that covers the Democratic Party in glory, despite how some of them are trying to spin it now. And here's like the critical point, and this is like the bulk of what I wanted to talk about because I wrote two pieces in quick succession on it this week. On mtracy.net, mtracey.net. If you haven't seen it, and I've tweeted it. I tweeted them both a few times over the past couple days. But I'm sorry, any Democrat who goes on one of these tortured interviews on MSNBC or something and says, "Oh, I'm just so concerned about the future of our democracy, and Joe Biden has done such a wonderful service to his country, and his record is fabulous. He'll go down in history as one of the best presidents, but we really have to have honest conversations about the best way forward. And if that requires Joe Biden stepping aside for the good of the nation, the party, then he must." And, that sort of style of, confessional that they're going around giving. Here's why that's not laudable in any respect. They just bizarrely gloss over that the number one singular goal of anyone, who has a conscientious citizen, maybe shouldn't always and everywhere 24/7 nonstop day in and day out be, can this person beat Trump? Can we defeat Trump? Look, I understand the Democrats don't like Trump, breaking news, okay? But as of today, Joe Biden has sole authority over the nuclear codes, meaning the only person who has sole authority to issue a nuclear launch order is Joe Biden. The nuclear command, vis-a-vis the branch of the military, STRATCOM, which controls the strategic nuclear arsenal, that command is structured unlike any other branch of the military in the U.S. Okay, so whereas other, civilian and military officials are inevitably involved in certain other discussions or planning or implementation around, say, sending the carrier ship group to the Eastern Mediterranean to provide quote unquote deterrent against Iran so they don't attack Israel, which Biden did after October 7th, that kind of thing. That's a multi-layered, multifaceted process in which, Biden does issue the ultimate order, but there's many layers of implementation. With the issuance of an order to launch the nuclear codes, meaning to issue an order that will launch nuclear missiles from the air, land, and sea-based launchers. That's an order that, once it's issued by the president, at least in theory, is irreversible and over which his subordinates have no further discretionary authority as to how to implement. So they must. So if Biden were to, be rustled out of bed at 3 a.m. tonight and issue the nuclear launch order, unless unknown subordinates were to break the chain of command, meaning defy their sworn duties, which is possible, so we don't know how this would actually work in practice. We don't have a couple of test cases that we can use to draw inferences, right? It's all speculative and theoretical, aside from the 1945 nuclear launches. But that was, a plane dropping them. It wasn't just, it wasn't this entire infrastructure of nuclear weaponry that has been built up in the subsequent decades. So it's much different. The Biden ultimately has sole authority over that issuance of the order. Now, of course, in practice, it could be the case that if Biden really did issue an order and was just in a state of mania or literal infirmity, and that were detected, I mean, it's always possible that somebody down the chain of command could thwart the order. But the fact would remain that the only person with the sole authority to issue the order is the president. Okay, and it just seems like that's a thought that never even occurs to any of these fretting Democratic members of Congress, or even the activists or the operatives. They think it's like lame to even think about. They think maybe it's pro-Trump in some respect because Trump is the one warning about World War III, which he probably does have a point about in terms of that being more and more of a realistic possibility. Whether he's the one to forestall World War III, I think, is a whole nother discussion. But they don't even really, they think it's like an illegitimate thought to have. Meanwhile, we have uninterrupted nuclear brinksmanship vis-a-vis Ukraine. Biden, who knows what his cognitive state was when he issued the directive in May, which actually, this was publicized on the day that Trump's guilty verdict came down in the Manhattan porn star payoff trial, to authorize Ukraine to use U.S. weaponry for cross-border strikes into Russia. And when that authorization was first made known, they sort of made it seem like the geographic range in which those weapons could be fired was going to be very strictly circumscribed. But then naturally, which was utterly predictable, the geographic range of tolerable targeting within Russia, of course, began to expand. At first, it was only supposed to be in the immediate Kharkiv region to strike, Russian installations or forces massing so that they couldn't wage their Kharkiv offensive or their newer Kharkiv offensive. But now it's expanded to unknown expanses of Russian territory. So you have that. Who knows what escalation could be next in Ukraine / Russia next month, 2 months from now, etc. And then also in the Middle East, Israel is putting out very clear signals, including by leaking that they've approved war plans and amassing forces more toward the north with near the border with Lebanon, that perhaps also in the next couple of weeks, there might be an outbreak of fuller scale war with Hezbollah. And who knows what escalatory potential that has. What would Iran do in that situation? We saw already that Iran was willing at least to do a somewhat seemingly serious missile salvo into Israel. Now, there's still questions around how that episode was organized or how much damage they didn't intend to inflict. So I'm not doubting that, but it's just another sign that there's clearly potential for escalatory outcomes beyond just Israel doing another incursion into Lebanon, which it's already done several times. Most recently 2006 and then 1982, was it? So I don't know, does Biden have the wherewithal to preside over that set of circumstances? Even if it doesn't rise to the level of a potential nuclear exchange? None of these Democrats seem like that ever crosses their mind. And, for that matter, I don't even see that many Republicans talking about that aspect of it. Obviously, they're more than willing to talk about how Biden is in a cognitively impaired state. But they don't know. Nobody seems to talk very much about the practical implications of that, given the world historic powers that the president, for better or worse, unilaterally wields. with the nuclear thing, I mean, Biden himself said in October of 2022 at a fundraiser, of course, that and by the way, the fundraiser was held. I learned this recently. I didn't realize at the time at the New York City penthouse of one of the uh, Rupert Murdoch children. I forget the guy's name now. He's like one of the more. It's not Lackland. Is it James? I forget now exactly. But it's the more liberal or democratically aligned Murdoch progeny. So yeah, that's where Biden stated, nonchalantly that the nuclear threat level as of October 2022 was the greatest that it had been since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't know what Biden's current prognosis is on that score. I don't know if he has the cognitive aptitude to even muster an estimate, but it would sure be nice to get an update, at some point, especially now that we're, about in a month and a half since he um, started officially allowing cross-border strikes into Russia using U.S. weaponry. Now that had been occurring de facto already uh, on a somewhat smaller scale, but there were already cross-border raids that these certain Ukrainian units had conducted, beginning most aggressively in May of 2023 that used U.S. provided weaponry. So it's not entirely new, but it's new that there's an official policy declaration on that score by the U.S. government. Tony Blinken was apparently lobbying for this naturally because he's the most hardline or one of the biggest hardliners on Ukraine policy. And who else is Biden deferring to if he's, got to retire for his slumber at 8 p.m. every night? And I mean, Tony Blinken, I'm sure is up at 9, devising various, strategic, um, directives for how to conduct the Ukraine policy, along with Jake Sullivan. So when people ask who's in charge, well, I mean, it's not some grand mystery. Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken run their respective portfolios. Biden just has to be, approached not that often to sign off on stuff. It's not like he has to be intimately involved in every aspect of how the National Security Council and the State Department are run. Reagan did this to some degree in his second term. He wasn't as clearly out of it, at least visually and audibly, as Biden is, but it was a comparable dynamic where the staff were keeping everything afloat. So yeah, I mean, what does Mike Quigley, the Illinois congressman who came out and said that Biden must step aside as of tonight on Chris Hayes' show with all, with their tortured looks and, oh, this is very difficult for me, but it's a healthy conversation to be having, blah blah blah. We love Joe Biden. Okay, you can love him with all your heart. You can strip naked and, do a ceremony for how wonderful you think he is, you know, wear one of those toga sheets or something and like a glow goddess and say, "We love you, Joe." I mean, however you want to express your undying love for Joe Biden, which I don't like really. I mean, I'm sure that they're grateful that he beat Trump. Okay, but they have the idea that they have this, uh, deep personal affection, like he's their grandfather or something. It's just, seems overblown to me. But even if they like him politically, okay, even if they think he's done a good job as president, whatever plaudits they want to shower him with, how about his ability to run the nuclear arsenal? I mean, I feel crazy like I'm the only one who seems to ever mention this. And again, you can go through all kinds of other scenarios that are of a lesser severity than a nuclear exchange, but still require an agile and, competent person to be the quote commander in chief. Okay. But nobody even brings it up. I mean, Chris Hayes didn't mention it, didn't even mention anything along those lines. It's always for them this, frantic political discussion about electoral outcomes because their lives then revolve around their, hallucinatory fears of Trump. And again, I'm not a Trump booster by any stretch. In fact, the MAGAs probably are madder at me recently than even the Democrats. Because, for example, I talked about how Trump was the one who orchestrated the Ukraine funding bill, the passage of the $61 billion of Ukraine funding, and like it's never recovered anywhere. Look up your favorite MAGA media source, see if they'll even acknowledge it. If they ever have, they largely just ignored it or denied it, or I mean, it's just memory hold. But Ukraine got the largest ever disbursement, and I've repeated this so many times, but it bears repeating because it's never said anywhere else. Ukraine, as of April, got the largest ever disbursement of U.S. funding since the beginning of the war. 61 billion. That could subsidize another 2 years-ish, year and a half of warfare. And Trump was integral in getting that passed. It probably could not have been passed given his, comically outsized influence over the Republican caucus in the House in particular. And I don't know, people just find ways to rationalize things, and they plop on their red MAGA hat and just, start hooting and hollering. And then, the facts are, vanquished. So, but that's nothing new. So I'm not trying to make a favorable even contrast with Trump in any respect. I'm just pointing out that there has to be some greater level of public awareness of a risk or a threat or a danger that Biden poses, and it's not just a purely political danger. Even if you're the most hardcore Democrat in the world, right, and you are worried and you think your fears are justified that Trump cannot be beaten by Biden, and therefore he's going to storm back into power with his insurrectionist cronies, blah, 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 domestic terrorists. Even if that were true, Biden is still, at the very least, constitutionally eligible to be president for another 6.5 months. Does that not raise any concerns? I mean, they love, these Dem insiders love going around saying how they need to vent their concerns, but those concerns seemingly never relate to Joe Biden's ability to preside over the most life or death functions that the president must preside over. So I feel like I'm wearing crazy pants, or I'm taking crazy pills, or I'm doing a crazy dance or something, because I'm the only one that I know of. I mean, I would love to be corrected. If anybody out there in Twitter land or YouTube land can give me a counterexample of somebody who has raised these issues, with a Dem insider or something, please tell me, and I will be happy to publicize it, but I haven't seen it. So yesterday, I followed through on my exhortations, and I went to a 4th of July parade where Congressman Josh Gottheimer was stomping around like he owned the place. Politicians absolutely love parades. One of these, and I enjoy parades too. It's an interesting display of kind of civic engagement. I always kind of I make a point to go to a Memorial Day parade every year. Not so much as often 4th of July parades. I don't know. I just don't really associate the 4th of July quite as much with parades, but I know there are some. But I go to a Memorial Day parade every year. I go to other stuff along those lines when, it's happening and I can have, access to it. I just find it interesting, talking to people at them and just, going and observing and, being a citizen. I am also a citizen of the United States. So performing my citizenship, I'm exercising some of the privileges of citizenship. Let's put it that way. And so Josh Gottheimer was there, and Josh Gottheimer is an interesting creature. Number one, he's well reputed to be, talk about tyranny, to have tyrannized his staff on many occasions. And you just get the sense that he's like one of these blustery type guys who probably ought to have been on Wall Street or something, or one of these, who's the Leonardo DiCaprio character in what's that movie? See, I'm like Joe Biden now. I know I got to look it up. With Margot Robbie, it'll come to me. Oh yeah, Wolf of Wall Street. So whoever that guy is. Josh Gottheimer just seems to have like that characteristic where he would, like, in another life, if he hadn't been like one of Bill Clinton's underling speechwriters in the 90s, he would have been one of these like cutthroat private equity people, or that's just his whole milieu. I mean, So he loves going around touting how he's a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, and he's always looking for bipartisan solutions. The district that he won in northern New Jersey, like Bergen County, um, had been Republican for a long time. Um, and so he stakes out this moderate position. Of course, he's obsessed with Israel. I didn't realize this, but a day before the 4th of July, he had just arrived back from the UAE and Israel, where who knows what the hell he's up to. He was one of the chief sponsors of that anti-Semitism legislation. When was it, like a month? What was it, like a month and a half ago? To change American civil rights law to punish or outlaw expressions of anti-Semitic speech on college campuses and other institutions that get federal funding, where anti-Semitic speech was defined as the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which includes likening Israel to Nazi Germany, saying anything that could be seen as unacceptable about the Holocaust. I mean, it's the most elastic definition of anti-Semitism imaginable. And so Josh Gottheimer did one of his glorious bipartisan accomplishments, like by getting that legislation through the House. People were worried that it means it could be anti-Semitic if you read the Bible or something, because you're saying that Jews don't accept Christ as the Lord and Savior. I don't know if that is precisely true, but it's possible. That's how expansive the definition was. So, but anyway, that's the type of stuff that he's involved in. His slogan is on all of his campaign material is Jersey values. I hate when people say Jersey as opposed to you can't say New Jersey. Like, you need a shorter title for the state. I just find that annoying. Jersey values lower taxes, and he's a Democrat. Okay. So he was in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey, Bergen County, small town. It was a perfectly nice 4th of July parade. Maybe I should go to more 4th of July parades. I just, for whatever reason, don't as intuitively associate 4th of July with parades, but there are plenty of parades. So he's going around shaking as many hands as possible, doing the whole politician shtick, where people have no clue who he is for the most part, even though he's their congressman. But they assume he must be important. That's why he's going, striding around with his polo shirt and shaking their hands and wishing them a happy 4th. You have to be a big deal if you make a point to do that. So he's going around and shaking hands. So when he came up to me to shake my hand, I asked him, "Do you think that Joe Biden should be in charge of the nuclear codes at age 86? And then I repeated the question, and he says, "Happy 4th," and then he runs away. Okay. And I will show you the photo of him running away. I know I should have my screen share thing set up. I will do that in the future. But now I'm going to be low tech and just put my phone up against the screen just so you can see it. So that's him running away. That's literally him running in the street away from me. Now, he was also doing this, like, I'm an energetic, enthusiastic politician thing, where he's like, I need to shake every hand, so I'm going to jog around and do it. But clearly, he also used that as a tactic to evade me. I wasn't yet deterred, so I trailed him till the end of the parade route. I saw that he was huddling with some of his lackeys, these lower level staff, they're just non-entities, but they think that one of their highest responsibilities in life is to detect any journalistic threat that they see that might be on the horizon, and insulate their glorious boss from any public scrutiny. So he was huddling with the staff, and then he kind of went out, which is kind of wandering off on his own. So I approached him calmly, nicely. I mean, people might think that I can be acidic at times, but For the most part, I want to be amicable. Um, and I repeated my question. Okay. And he's same wording. Okay. So I didn't even stray from my wording because I wanted it to be a very simple and straightforward question. And yes, I recognize that politicians, or any of these Dem insiders should be asked the same question about whether Biden can perform the duties today, much less in 4.5 years from now. But I do think if you frame it around Biden's ability to have sole authority over the nuclear arsenal at age 86, which again is what he would be if he served hypothetically a full second term. I think that this crystallized the issue. Like, yeah, it's hard to imagine that anybody in good conscience could say, "Oh yeah, that seems, no problem, swell." I can't. It's hard to imagine anybody actually saying that with a straight face. So I think that kind of better crystallizes the issue because maybe you can make an argument that okay, yeah, maybe Biden should. He's on the decline, but maybe he can stick. Maybe he can power through the next 6 months and then let somebody else take the reins. But if you're projecting out to age 86, I mean, please. So I asked Gottheimer the question twice. And then he made this. He responded as though, hey, just hang tight 1 second, pal. I just got to go do something, but I'll be right back. He didn't say that, but that's sort of like he kind of like had me say, oh yeah, just wait there for a second. I just got to go do something. I'll be right back. Like that was his kind of what he was. That was his response, effectively. I don't have the exact quote of what he really said there, but that was like kind of the impression he was trying to give. So as though he had to go back and huddle with the staff again, right? Who are this like? Who are like a bunch of like 23-year-olds, who don't know anything. Who were just like non-entities. No, nothing against people who are 23, but they don't really have high level prestigious positions. And of course, he didn't come back. He tried to sneak away. Okay. So I tried to follow him for a couple of, yards to restate the question. Because to me, I mean, I acknowledge that I have an unusual temperament and maybe even psychology where I'm not that worried about people thinking it's like rude or improper or whatever to attempt to ask a member of Congress a question of vital public interest at a public event. And people, I mean, there are people who find that very irksome and they don't like it and they get offended. I mean, but I don't really care because I feel, it's clearly the correct thing to do, at least for my purposes. So I'm going to do it if at all possible. So it was funny. So his tactic at that point. So at that point, the staffers realized that they had a problem where they had to protect the boss, right? Because they couldn't tolerate him being subjected to any kind of journalistic scrutiny. So these congressional staff members have this whole game plan where they literally will try to block you out as though they're setting a pick in a basketball game or they're on offensive line in a football game where they put their bodies on the line and have this whole it's happened to me on several occasions with Republicans and Democrats where they will try to physically kind of barricade you so you cannot approach them. And these are public events, okay? This is not like me sneaking into some private event or being somewhere where I'm not authorized to be. No, you're like literally on the street on like a big a public avenue, okay? So two of the staff tried to do that. One says, "Oh, can you just tell me your question and then you can email it to me?" I'm like, no, I think I prefer to ask the question directly. I mean, that's the most ridiculous ploy that they try to use. Oh yeah, just send us an email and we'll get back to you. First of all, I don't want to give him I was there because I'm not looking to just send off an email and get some perfunctory pro forma statement. No, I mean, sometimes there are things you have to ask in person or directly that are far more illuminating in the answers that you receive than if you were just to get a stupid email. And I doubt they even reply to the email. So no. And then when the guy was like, and I said, no, I said to the staffer, No, I think I'll ask him like my question directly. And he said, "That's not how this works." Hmm. Okay. Interesting. Explain to me how it works then, my liege. Like, are you my better, or are you? What is your exalted status where you have this authority to explain to me what works? You're working for a member of Congress. This is the branch of government that's supposed to be the most responsive to local concerns and queries and whatever. So don't try to explain to me what. If you want, I can give you some remedial instruction in how the First Amendment works. It seems you might have a bit of deficiency in your understanding of that, but unfortunately, we didn't really have time for a full lesson. Although I'm very much available if anybody in that office wants to seek out my services. Um, but then what happens is that when these staffers start acting all crazed, they're the ones causing a scene to the extent that a scene gets caused. And then that attracts, attention from bystanders or law enforcement who might be, you know, uh, prowling around. And so one as I was trying to like just continue walking in the direction of the congressman to repeat my question, a police officer, and says to me, "Look, you're going to get you better watch out. You're going to get arrested." I said, "Huh? For what? For attempting to ask a member of Congress a question at a public event?" Who said you look like you're trying to do this aggressively? Because so I'm now the aggressor. It appears because they assume that I must be the one up to no good, right? In this kind of situation, this always happens. Um, because the staff take it upon themselves to be these like physical, goon squad types where they're trying to, block you out like they're setting a pick in a basketball game. That's what they do. Um, you know how you set a pick in a basketball game if people aren't familiar, so the defender will like crash into one of the offensive players, and then the guy with the ball can, either throw a pass or make a, you know what I'm talking about. But the thing is that when the staff act in this officious, obnoxious manner, it then makes the kind of um, unacquainted sort of bystander, including the police, think that I must be the one who's in the wrong, to the extent that there's like someone doing something wrong, and so at that point, as I have done on many occasions, I just de-escalated with the officer, explained to him what I was doing, said I'm not trying to do anything improper at all. You can accompany me. I offered the cop you can walk with me to go ask the congressman a question. You can ask him. I don't care. Um, so he got it. I mean, eventually, but you could say, I don't blame the cops necessarily because they're in a position where they think it's their highest responsibility to ensure that there's no threat to the saintly member of Congress, even though, of course, there was no threat. Um, the staff and the congressman are the ones that try to make the appearance that there's a threat, so they can thwart any possibility that they could be asked an uncomfortable question. Um, uh, so that happened, and I asked the police officer, "Look, I want your direct, I want to be want to be absolutely clear. I can go proceed to attempt to ask my question, right?" He said, "Yeah, you can do it. Just don't do it aggressively." It's okay. I mean, there's no need for anyone to be aggressive. I'm not trying to be aggressive at all. I'm not looking to get a pick set on me by stupid staffers. So no, everything was fine. So I proceeded, and so obviously in his like peripheral awareness, Gottheimer was then cognizant that I was continuing to reapproach, and so what he did was he stopped right in front of a stationary marching band from the parade that was playing. I wish I remember the patriotic anthem now. My focus was diverted. I don't know what anthem it was. But he stopped right in front of a stationary marching band playing at full volume. Okay. So even if I tried to scream the question right into his ear, he could have maybe plausibly made it seem like he didn't hear it. Okay. But he couldn't stay there for that long. So then this is the funniest. And I wish I had taken a photo of this booth. But he then ducked into the Grand Marshal booth. So one of, painted with bright glorious colors, and it's where the Grand Marshal of the parade, which is like a guy in his 70s who has a legacy of volunteer service in Ridgefield Park, and then gets nominated for the Grand Marshal of the parade role, where he sits on this little ceremonial chair in a booth, and the congressman wanted to join him. Really to evade me. Maybe he would have done it anyway, but like that, he saw that as a way to kind of insulate himself from my questioning. And maybe he didn't have quite the presence of mind to realize that the only available chair in the booth was right next to like the open ledge on the booth. So it's like there's no real window on it, which is like right open the ledge. So I got my final opportunity, and this I was satisfied with. I would leave at this point to ask him twice more directly 2 feet away. Zero chance that he couldn't hear me. He heard me clear as a bell. Is that the right word? Clear as a whistle, clear as a beautiful spring morning. I don't know what the correct phrase is. Clear as day. Okay, yeah, that's it. He heard me clear as day. Do you think that Joe Biden should be in charge of the nuclear codes at age 86? And all I did was just keep on his big dumb smile, like he's just like watching the parade, and being this happy presence, and he's chipper, he's into it, he's energetic, he's engaged in the community. And just doesn't answer, just ignores me flat out. So that told me everything I needed to know. Didn't need to pursue it any further at that point, really. Certainly didn't want to arouse any additional law enforcement attention, because you never know what misimpressions somebody might get, even though I can usually de-escalate those sorts of situations, and did yesterday. So I followed through on my appeal that I issued publicly through the mtracy.net article that I did, and I've also obviously tweeted up a storm about it. For all these Dem insiders, don't let them off the hook, please, people, media, anybody who's a conscientious citizen, anybody who has a stake in like the future of humanity. Don't let these Dem insiders off the hook, where all they have to say is, "Oh, geez, yeah, we're having these difficult but important conversations about who can beat Trump." Fine. I'm sure there's nothing that can stop you from having that quote conversation, but maybe somebody should converse with them here and there about whether Joe Biden can preside over the nuclear arsenal over which he has sole authority. Okay, it's simple. And then also, if you want to get into the details, ask if you would be just thrilled with Biden being the one who's in the command center, or in the the situation room for the next if Hezbollah launches and encourage, if some major conflagration breaks out between Israel and Hezbollah in say 2 weeks. Does Biden being the man in charge give you no pause? I'm not asking you because I want you to therefore give Trump your ringing endorsement to be the guy who really ought to be the one presiding over an Israel Hezbollah conflagration, and Trump's position on Israel. That's a whole nother can of worms. Maybe we can delve into at a later date. But just in terms of sheer cognitive ability, okay, ability to quickly and rapid and neatly absorb rapidly incoming information, process that information, make quick decisions, heavy pressure, time sensitive, thousands, potentially millions of lives on the line. Right? It can't even be exaggerated how consequential of a role this really is, which maybe is a lesson for of why it would be potentially a better idea down the line to maybe diminish some of the powers of the presidency, but don't expect that to happen anytime soon. And yes, the Supreme Court ruling this week did enhance the powers of the presidency radically by formalizing what had previously been, up until 2023, a more informal cultural norm against prosecuting any president and immunizing them from criminal liability for their official acts. The Supreme Court, at the instigation, yes, of Jack Smith and the DOJ, who stretched the law in their own right to bring those prosecutions of Trump. In response, the Supreme Court now has henceforth ruled that the president is officially immunized from a huge array of official actions causing him criminal liability. We don't get to that now anymore. But yeah, I mean, so given the awesome powers of the presidency, I just want one of these pundits or somebody to give some indication that they can have a more broader outlook on the implications of Joe Biden's apparent cognitive decrepitude beyond just that. Okay, beyond that, just that Biden might not be able to win Wisconsin. I mean, okay, sometimes there are like other things in life to be worried about, but apparently not for. Um, Probably not for the Dem insiders. Despite my best efforts, and I have contributed thus far, and tomorrow I'm doing it again. I'm not going to spill the beans yet, but hopefully I will get another opportunity to ask one of these Dem insiders a serious question along these same lines. So stay tuned. You can subscribe to the Substack at mtracy.net if you'd like. I've been updating that more and more lately. There's been, after a period of slightly more intermittent posting, but that's ramping up again. So take a look at that if you're interested. And now I'm going to look through my comments. One thing that's strange in this, somebody please correct me if I'm wrong or I'm not looking at this correctly, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. In the X broadcast, in the chat, it doesn't look like you can scroll up and see all the older comments. So I just see like a couple dozen of them. And maybe there aren't enough. But I'll go through a few of what I do see. And then there are also YouTube commenters. So if you want to go to my YouTube, which hadn't been frequently updated in a while, but maybe I'll do more of that now. And my stream here does also get simulcast onto YouTube. Let's see. Timothy asks, Michael, the fact is, or declares, Michael, the fact that Biden couldn't make these decisions today, someone else would make them for him. This is what we're going to do, right, Mr. President? I mean, look, I think that's maybe a little bit too simple. I do think that even an 81-year-old in a state of cognitive decline can make decisions that are then transmitted to his subordinates and then executed or implemented by further subordinates. So I don't really buy this idea that like Biden just doesn't make any decisions at all. I do think actually the government is run in accordance with his preferences, at least in terms of the executive branch. Barring evidence that contradicts that. It doesn't mean that Biden's cognitive impairment is not an issue. Far from it. It just means I think people tend to overstate the level of impairment. Now, it's certainly possible that by age 86, the impairment could accelerate to the point where it really wouldn't be him making any decision. And that's in part why I've been going around asking these Dem insiders about the nuclear arsenal question. People who are asking my odds now. Okay, actually, yeah, this is somebody just asked, or somebody wrote, what are my current odds of a Biden withdrawal? I did say I was going to try to talk through what revision I might make to my odds as of this morning, after Biden did his George Stephanopoulos interview on ABC, which I did watch. I'm sure all you watched with bated breath to see how Joe would do. Let's see. So there were 35 as of this morning. I think I'm going to keep it at 35. Yep, that's my statement. That's my declaration. The odds remain at 35. I think Biden's performance in the interview was not catastrophic to the level that it was during the debate, which is a low bar. I could imagine some Democrats who are a bit anxious seeing that debate and thinking to themselves, okay, maybe he could handle this. It wasn't really a major swing one way or another. I mean, there is talk now of Mark Warner, the Democratic senator from Virginia, by the way, who's the also the senator with the highest net worth, just by coincidence, having some kind of discussions about maybe approaching Biden. That could happen. Congress has been out of session this week, so it's probably been There hasn't been as much coordinated action as there would be if they are all in DC. So that's a possibility that could happen. I think the interview kind of dampened the momentum somewhat. I mean, it's still a high no, it's still a high odds that Biden could withdraw in the grand scheme. 35%, give me a break. I mean, that's almost unfathomable. I just don't think they really dramatically changed one way or another after that interview. Um, yeah, so I'm going to keep him at 35. And somebody also recommended I should make a graphic with my rolling odds. That's a good idea. I don't know where I would stick the graphic. I guess right like over my face or something. So he has like 30 or right 35 in my forehead. I'll do that. I'll get a magic marker. I'll write 35% on my forehead. Let's see. Just going through some additional comments. Also, people, now I realize that when I tweet it out, people can just write tweet replies. Somebody named Dick Johnson, hope that's his real name. Not going to happen. He's going to run, meaning Biden's not going to withdraw. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I don't do. So I would never make a definitive statement. Biden's not going to drop out. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not an oracle. I'm not a mystic. Okay, I can give you what I would assign probabilistic odds to, but that's different from me acting like I have a time machine and I can make those kinds of conclusive statements. Carlos says Kissinger was likely more lucid on the day that he died than Biden is today. Very possible. Kissinger was amazingly lucid up until, as far as I can tell, the very end. Actually, Biden revealed not too long ago that he spoke on the phone with Kissinger a week before Kissinger died in November at age 100. Kissinger wrote his final book, and I believe that he wrote it at 99. Kissinger was a special specimen. His longevity is just amazing because he, in his latter years, he didn't look like he was in particularly good physical shape. He was like he wasn't. He was sort of like rotund, but I don't know. There was something about him where he just had this longevity serum, I guess, and maybe Richard Nixon injected him in his ass with longevity serum in the 70s, and that just carried forth for many decades. Somebody mentioned on YouTube, Laura Loomer has said that, look, I find Laura Loomer amusing. I actually met her for the first time in New Hampshire in the primaries, where I witnessed her get ejected from a Dean Phillips event, by the way, who has been, at least in the eyes of these Dem insiders, at least preliminarily vindicated. Because Dean Phillips tried to get somebody else to run against Biden, that ran himself, and one of his core arguments was that Biden's just too darn old. They got hammered at the time by meaning Dean Phillips for having this quixotic run that was just trying to take down Biden. So now I see on StreamYard that I do get both YouTube and X comments in the same stream. I like that. Very nice. Very, very nice. By the way, if you watch me on these streams long enough, you'll know that sometimes I'll go into my Batman impression. I feel like it's pretty good. So I'm going to read the next question in the Batman voice. Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer said, Biden, a medical emergency. Is this true? I assume this is not true. That wasn't the greatest. Maybe my voice is raspy. I got to practice a little bit more. I'm out of practice in my Batman voice, but you get the idea. Laura Loomer. I mean, people just throw crap out there. I think what she did is she looked at a White House pool report, which is, there's one journalist in the press pool, which is this, elite little clique with White House press access that gets to follow around Biden everywhere. Where they kind of claim that he wasn't seen going to his house or something. I don't know. She just seems to have just made something up and then made a whole big rumor on X. But no, I mean, I that's don't believe dumb rumors. I mean, don't people not want to be treated like they're stupid? I mean, that's my problem with quote disinformation. Not that it's like a bit just like major threat to democracy, but how about having like the critical thinking skills to not just believe every like piece of trash you see floating across your feed on the internet with no verification? I mean, doesn't that aren't you like an adult? I mean, I mean, even if you're a child, like you shouldn't tolerate that. Although children are expected to use their imagination and be creative and have imaginary friends and things. If you're an adult and you think that you're like being a responsible news consumer and you just believe any garbage that you see with zero verification from one of these stupid engagement generating accounts, um, that's your own problem. I don't know why you would want to live that way. uh Andrew says his mother says she doesn't care for me, but she likes Matt Taibbi. Sorry, that's fine. I'm not sure I care for myself, so tell your mother I take no offense. I take no umbrage. See if she's impressed by my use of the word umbrage. Maybe that'll change her mind. BBQ Chicken. I assume that's your legal name. Says, is there any way that the Democrats could force him out if he refuses? Okay, so I'm going to go over this briefly. Um, because I did a whole thing on it in the previous stream. I guess the short answer is no, but there's a little bit of the qualifier. Okay. Um, so let me pull up a tweet that was flagged today. There's this guy Alex Thompson correspondent for Axios who has been covering the Biden cognitive decline saga for a while now and angered a lot of Dems, but they seem not to begrudgingly realizing that he was probably on target. So this is Congressman Brad Sherman of California, Democrat, who I've interviewed in the past. Intelligent guy, I would say. Uh, Fairly sensible for by politician standards. Although I wouldn't say I quote agree with him, but there you have it. Here's what he said. This is a little bit ominous. He says this was today, 4:42 p.m. Counter to popular belief. I thought it was contrary to popular belief. I guess counter works, but he says counter to popular belief. The rules of the Democratic Party do not, all caps, require that pledged delegates vote for Biden at the convention. That's a wild statement. He continues, party rules require delegates' votes, quote, reflect the sentiments of those who elected them at the time the delegates cast their ballots. And he adds a further tweet, Democratic primary voters have one overarching sentiment. We need a candidate who will beat Donald Trump. Now, let's just leave that strange statement to the side for one moment. There are states, okay, like Arizona, I've been through this, New Mexico, a handful of others, where state law provides that delegates to a party's national convention are legally required to vote at the convention on the first ballot in accordance with the outcome of the primary election in their state. So in Arizona, for example, at least by the letter of the law, all Biden delegates, all Democratic primary delegates, I think in Arizona he swept it. There are a handful of other states where there were one or two uncommitted delegates rather. But if I'm not mistaken, he has every delegate in Arizona. So the Arizona Democratic Convention delegates are, at least by the letter of the law, required on penalty of criminal prosecution to vote for Biden in the first ballot. Now, Sherman here, and that's not true for every state. But reflect the sentiments of those who elected them has always been understood without qualification, as far as I'm aware, as far as I can recollect, that means if you're a bound delegate, so if Joe Biden gets 98% of the vote in Democratic primary, and therefore every Democratic National Convention delegate becomes bound to him, they're required to vote for the bound candidate. I mean, we're through the looking glass here with Sherman seemingly trying to imply, not so um, subtly, that that the delegates could decline to vote for Biden and still be, quote, reflecting the sentiments of those who elected them to vote for Biden. People literally checked Joe Biden's name on the ballot in these primary elections, and in doing so, elected certain delegates who would therefore represent their votes, represent the voters' will at the convention, and vote for Biden as the nominee. So if they're introducing this theory, then I don't know. Maybe all bets are off. I doubt that would really gain enough traction to be a realistic alternative. Meaning, the actual pledged Biden delegates just defy every convention, every expectation, and just don't vote for him in the first ballot. I think that would be challenged by the DNC leadership, who are committed to Biden, as far as we know, by the Biden campaign, who control the DNC executive committee and so forth, more or less. So maybe there is like this through the looking glass theory that could be employed to not nominate Biden in the first ballot. But remember, they have been dangling this idea that they're going to have, and they confirm that they're going to do this. Actually, we just don't know the exact date yet. But in advance of the actual convention convening on August 19th, I think it is, at some point before that, maybe even weeks before, as early as July 21st, so it's now July 5th, we're talking about just over 2 weeks from now, they could have this virtual convention or virtual roll call vote, which the DNC has announced that they're going to be doing, basically obviating any need for a convention, because the whole purpose of a convention, at least traditionally, is that's where you nominate the nominee. But they're doing away with that. They're abolishing that, apparently. And they're using the excuse that they had to do it because Ohio had this strange law in effect that would have made it impossible for Biden to get on the ballot in time of the convention. But Ohio revised that law. Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio signed legislation on June 2nd that revised that restriction in Ohio election law, and Biden can appear on the ballot as normal with no further action. Yet, the DNC has decided that they're going to press forward with their virtual convention or virtual roll call gambit, because they did in 2020. So, just act like COVID's still, raging and continue on with that. Maybe make it permanent. Maybe make it a permanent fixture of Democratic Party procedure. Because who needs to actually be physically at the convention to nominate the candidate? That's literally the purpose of the convention. I mean, they have all kinds of fanfare and speeches and other things associated with a convention to kind of broaden out the purpose of it. But the core purpose is literally to nominate the candidate. But they're going to be doing it virtually, right? We don't even know the exact date. Could be as early as July 21st. Or at least that's what Bloomberg reported a few days ago. So that makes it so that the delegates can't be lobbied in a way that they could be if they were physically at the convention, theoretically. And remember, these are all mainline Democratic Party functionary types, local officials, county clerks, or local activists, people who are in the main frame of the Democratic Party professional class, but they're not even like the elite DC class. I mean, there are people like, I don't know, Barbara from Las Vegas or something, who runs a little Democratic Party outfit, or is in some affiliated group, or I don't know, Sally from New Hampshire. It's not like these aren't like the biggest of bigwigs in the party. They're just people who can get nominated by their state party to serve as petition their county, state, and local officials to be nominated as delegates. So they're not the people who you would think are going to be most inclined to rock the boat. They're going to be probably. I would have to think that the vast majority of those Biden delegates, even those who might be now wary of Biden's ability to continue, would think that they are obliged, which, I mean, again, by every expectation, custom, seemingly, I thought by the letter of the law in the DNC bylaws, but apparently not according to Brad Sherman. They're bound. I mean, they're called bound delegates or pledged delegates. A pledged delegate. So you have super delegates. This has been a big controversy over the years, especially in 2016, because the super delegates all lined up with Hillary, right? Well before there were any primary elections that were held against Bernie Sanders. The super delegates they're called unpledged delegates. So they are people who are entitled to cast a vote at the convention for the nominee, the presidency, and the vice presidency, even though they were not elected by any popular election. So they're members of Congress, governors, some maybe state officials, various people who are just in the party firmament, okay? But funnily enough, there was a reform instituted after the 2016 convention at the DNC where, if I'm not mistaken, I have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure the super delegates, meaning the unpledged delegates, the delegates that will go into who are not pledged to vote for Biden, they can't vote on the first ballot, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but there was some reform made that limited the ability of the unpledged or super delegates to vote on the first ballot. But I'll double check that when the stream is over. Now, the pledged delegates, they're the ones who were assigned on the basis of the candidate to which they were pledged, given the outcomes of the primary elections in their states. They're pledged to Biden. That's why they're called pledged delegates. So Brad Sherman just suggesting that those pledged delegates are actually not pledged at all to vote for the candidate who actually won the primary in their state, that's a wild new theory. I'm curious to hear more details over what he's trying to cook up there. So I guess the basic answer to whoever asked that BBQ chicken, I think, is no. There's no way the Democrats could force him out. Now they can continue to exert informal pressures. So if you say force him out, meaning an actual legal mechanism to deprive him of the nomination, no, I don't think there's a way to do that. There is a way to continue to attempt to exert or force upon him pressure to maybe recalibrate. So that's donors potentially withdrawing their contributions. There was a joint letter that was put out, I saw today, by business leaders, which I hate earnestly calling them business leaders, whoever. Democratic elected officials, I think, would have some purchase on Biden. So if there were a major drumbeat calling for him to withdraw within the Congress or among governors, among congressional candidates, that started. But if that were really to reach a fever pitch, that could exert pressure. But even then, even with, let's say, hypothetically, every member of Congress, every Democratic member of Congress called on Biden to withdraw, that still wouldn't force him to withdraw, in the sense that could legally deprive him of the nomination, right? Maybe it would make his acceptance of the nomination politically untenable, and then he would have to choose to withdraw. But he could be hanging by the thinnest of threads, and still, I think, has the nomination secured. Again, barring some coalescence of just insurmountable informal pressures. that cause him to make a recalibration. Dunkin' Donuts. That's funny. His name is Dunkin' Donuts, uh, but it's spelled like it's like a German surname or something. Um, he says, "I'm curious about the legality of someone with dementia signing treaties laws. People with dementia sometimes can't sign contracts. I think with treaties and international agreements, there are who know. I mean, you would have to look to what the rules or laws are in the host country that say the U.S. is signing a bilateral treaty with. But the U.S. But Biden is talking about signing a major bilateral treaty with Saudi Arabia ahead of the election. It seems to formalize the Abraham Accords framework that everybody loves, who is a Trump cheerleader, just because Jared Kushner was the one who orchestrated that. But Biden's continued that framework and expanded it to include Saudi Arabia, with the idea being that the U.S. is going to extend binding treaty guaranteed security commitments to Saudi Arabia in exchange for them, of course, recognizing Israel. And that would be the first time that the U.S. has signed a major bilateral treaty of such magnitude, where they're formally extending security guarantees in a treaty consecrated manner, since a similar treaty was signed with Japan, I think, in 1960. Okay, so apparently Biden is going to be the one who is shepherding through that treaty, and yeah, I mean, his cognitive state might raise some concerns over whether he can competently sign the treaty. I would think, but it's possible. Now, I think what would have to happen. I mean, it's hard to say. I think there might have to be a process whereby Biden was adjudicated mentally deficient or mentally incompetent, right? So it wouldn't be enough for somebody to just just say, "Oh, he fumbles his words. He lost his train of thought at the debate. He seems slower. He seems like he might not be up to the job." I don't think that's sufficient for a formal adjudication of him as incapable of wielding his authorities or exercising his authorities, such as the authority to broker treaties. Um, like I was just, as one does, looking through the fine details of the Nevada election law, and there's a provision where if a candidate, so between the period of the primary election, which I think was in early June, and then the fourth Friday in July, a major party nominee can be replaced on the ticket after having been nominated if they die or are legally adjudicated insane and or mentally incompetent. Now, this wouldn't apply to Biden once he's nominated because, but then after the fourth Friday in July, the nominee can't be rescinded even if they die, and even if they're adjudicated mentally incompetent or insane. So if as of July 26th, I think it is. Yeah, July 26th, the nominee of a major party for a partisan office in Nevada cannot be replaced on the ballot even if they die. And there have been cases where dead people have been elected in Nevada. The guy who ran the Bunny Ranch or whatever it was, he died before. I'm pretty sure he won like a Nevada state delegate race after his death because it was too late to replace him on the ballot. Now Biden hasn't been nominated yet, so it doesn't apply to him as of now. So let's say Biden does secure the nomination. He's officially nominated by the Democratic National Convention, um, and then has a major medical episode, right, and must withdraw, or let's say he dies, he can't be replaced in the ballot at that point. So Democrats would be conceding Nevada's electoral votes. Because remember, it comes down to individual state laws. I'm not familiar with every state's laws in this respect. Um, but yeah. Um, so so in terms of a candidate in that situation in Nevada being, they would have to be adjudicated mentally incompetent. Now, what's an adjudication, right? Is it just a judge? Um, you have to drill down into the details of what would constitute that adjudication. So, in terms of the legality of Biden having, quote, dementia, which I'm not sure. I mean, I just think he has an extreme. I don't know what he has. I shouldn't even speculate. Um, I think the legality of treaties or other agreements that might be established by Biden, um, being called into question on account of his competency, would probably have to be determined by some formal adjudicatory process that he's mentally impaired, right? And the president has no obligation to subject himself to an adjudicatory process, right? He actually said in the ABC Stephanopoulos interview today that um, Stephanopoulos was asking him, "Will you take a cognitive assessment?" And he says, "I get one every day, just because the job is so intensive, and he's doing such a great job." So there's no way that I know of to force him to take a cognitive proficiency test. So yeah, but that's an interesting subject. People should be additional research done on that. Um, couldn't the state legislature pass a patch? I think it would be too late. I guess this guy is asking Don. Couldn't the state legislature, say in Nevada, pass a revision to enable? I don't know. I guess maybe. I can't give a definitive answer on that. Maybe they could. But the thing is, see, we're getting to all these wacky scenarios, given how ridiculous this situation is. Where people are like literally now we have to find out what the definition of the word adjudicated is and what process is entailed by that in the case of a major party nominee becoming mentally incapacitated. Again, the original sin here was the collective Democratic Party elites, elected officials, and whoever meekly and flippantly deferring to Biden becoming president again up until age 86, in advance of any contested primary. And they stifled the primary. They even gave Dean Phillips a hell of a time and ran him out of town. He's not even running again for election in Congress, Dean Phillips, because he got such pushback for just making mild critiques of Biden's competency. He didn't even make. I mean, the reason why I wasn't running around declaring my allegiance to Dean Phillips is because Dean Phillips almost assiduously usually declined to make a real substantive critique of Biden. It was really just about his personal fitness. And I would make, if it were up to me, I would make a more substantive critique. Yeah, so that's why Dean Phillips wasn't lighting my world on fire. But if you're just a mainline normie Dem, right, and you just want any Democrat to beat Trump, that's like your number one goal in life. Like you don't care about the nuclear codes or whatever. Then Dean Phillips' argument is one that you should have took deadly seriously at the time. But again, he got lacerated. Dunkin' Donuts says Biden Feinstein would be a good ticket. I agree. Two corpses. All right. Well, like I said, everybody, take a look at those two items that I wrote in quick succession this week at mtracy.net, or they're tweeted on my feed about my encounter with the pig-headed congressman from northern New Jersey, Josh Gottheimer, who did everything in his power to avoid answering my very simple and straightforward question: do you think that Joe Biden ought to be in charge of the nuclear codes at age 86? Memorize that one, folks, because if you encounter a Dem insider out in the wild, or even heck online, hopefully you have sufficient cognitive aptitude that you can easily recall that very simple question and present it to them firmly but politely, and see what they say. I don't think there's a good answer. I actually was, when I was at that parade yesterday, I was telling just random people, I was just chatting with random people at the parade about Gottheimer's refusal to answer my question. And people would just laugh and say, yeah, there's really no good answer to that question, which there isn't. I mean, so in a way, I don't blame Josh Gottheimer for shutting down and not providing an answer, because what's he going to say? Oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's have Joe running the nuclear arsenal at age 86. What could go wrong? Oh yeah, so like I said, tomorrow it's going to be another adventure for me. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag quite yet. But yeah, there will be another attempt on my part to put this question to another insider of some national profile. So we'll see what happens. And I will keep you all updated. Take care, everybody, and goodbye.